Okay, so we are back at home doing a video today with these heathens. She just got in trouble because I was trying to pet Taz and she was trying to lunge at him and bite his face while he was trying to do that. So that was not good. So she got mad at me and went over there. Should be alright. So today what I was thinking about before last night. Never know where to start on the stories, right? So the other day, I was at my brother's house and scrolling on Instagram, and this post came up where this girl was talking about synchronicities. She is somebody that I started following on Instagram shortly after I got it, and I did this this coaching thing that Aaron Dowdy and Victor Odo did, and at the end of it, everybody was kind of sharing their Instagram information so we could follow each other and support whatever projects going forward any of us were doing. So that was how I connected with this chick. So I know she's had some posts along the way that I've thought that it's like, it's not really something I vibe with, but still support that she's doing the thing, right? And so she does this post the other day, and she's talking about synchronicities. And the one that, the story she's talking about has to do with like a song that was playing, and I don't remember all the details, but it was all about the song and this message that was specifically relevant because of the song. And this amazing God sign synchronicity thing, right? So by all means, I'm a big fan of synchronicities. So since she had just posted about synchronicities and she had posed the question of, has anybody else had anything, I was like, what the fuck, I'll bite, right? And so just for the sake of engaging with her content, I shared the synchronicity, the weird synchronicity that I had the other day, where I was over at my brother's house and I was journaling about my the difficulty I've been having with packing, because I don't have any kind of plan, right? It's like, I know my step at some point will be to leave this space that is my parents' house. There's a butterfly in the pond. In the near future, right? At some point. I don't know what pieces have to come together to make that happen. I know there'll have to be some kind of income on that end that would be able to allow for that to happen, among other things. So, because of the stories that I've told in this space, I've realized that my next step for me personally was to start, get the storage unit and start packing things up and making space in this space as though I'm ready to bring in the next things, right? So it's all like the intention setting of clearing out stuff from this existence to make room for whatever wants to come in. Right. So I'm journaling, and I mention that it would be a lot easier to know how to pack if there was any kind of plan and I had any kind of date or time frame that anything was happening, because if I were to move in 2 weeks, that's a lot different packing that I would be doing than if I had this game plan for I'm moving in 5 months, right? So just how prepared am I trying to be? It's like I'm trying to make the space, but at the same time, I still want to have access to the stuff that I'm using or would want to use in that time frame. So, right. So anyway, as I was journaling this, it's like specifically discussing the point of it would be easier if I knew how to pack, like, for whatever's coming. And I was watching a tarot reading at the time. It was a Venus return tarot reading. And she said, like, right as I wrote that, she said something about, you don't need logic, you don't need a plan, you just need to have a sense and follow the sense. It was like, well, that's like exactly speaking to what I'm thinking. So for me, that was a pretty big synchronicity. And, you know, I've talked about it on here a few times. And I journaled about it because immediately, like as soon as I realized what she'd said, I backtracked to it so I could write down the exact words that she said. And it's like, yep. Okay, cool. So just to give this lady some kind of engagement on her page, I responded with my synchronicity. And 555. As I'm looking at my weird hair that keeps wanting to stand up right there. Last night, I forgot all about it after that, right? So, and, you know, I figured if she responded or anything, it would flag me, surely. It did not. So I think she, like, commented rather than actually specifically replying to my message. So I didn't get it. I didn't get the first message that she sent. When I think she realized that I hadn't got the message, she replied to my message, like actually to my message. So it tagged me. So then last night I get this alert, right? So I go back in and she said, I replied, but I'm not sure why it put my comment ahead of yours and like all this stuff. It's like, whatever, I don't know. So I was like, all right, let's go back and read, right? So I started reading what she had said. And okay, there are some things that automatically make me inclined to just glaze over and not want to read something. And it was kind of like that. And it's like, the first thing was she had this thing talking about faith and walking with God kind of a thing. But then there was a Jesus mention in there. Now, mind you, I have absolutely no problems with Jesus. I just think the church completely hijacked his entire message and fucked it up to control people. That I have a problem with. And I know that I met this girl in this space where, you know, it was talking a lot about meditation and all this other stuff. That's a lot of the content for Aaron and Vic's. It was like the, I don't remember what the coaching thing was, but it was, basically for starting your spiritual business kind of a thing, you know, but it's like generally not hugely religious types in that, right? So because that was the dynamic of where I found her, even though I know sometimes she shifts to kind of churchy sounding stuff, and it's like, yeah, I tried to read more of what she was saying, and it didn't get any better. And it was just like, I can't do it. So instead I just deleted my comment like I started responding, and then it was like everything in me was just like, that's the big thing, especially since so much of my life was spent trying to fit the mold that I was conditioned to believing I had to fit because of the church, and because of, you know, the things I was learning from them. It's like I have a really hard time not completely glazing over and just like, nope, I don't want any part of this. So, and it's usually as soon as I see the message of, or see Jesus' name on there, I tend to glaze over, because generally what follows is very contrary to the message that I received, like from when I was in church all the time and actually trying to study the Christ message. It's like everything the church was teaching was like not the church message, or like the Christ message, right? So yeah, like as soon as anything comes up where I feel like that is what's being handed to me, I glaze over. And I was thinking about it earlier, and it's like, and I've thought about this many times. I probably even said it on here before. I feel like with all the growth that I've been having, experiencing all this stuff, it didn't take much for it to feel like anything where somebody's trying to pose a church type belief feels like a literal step backwards. And I think that goes largely because, I mean, most of them don't even truly get the Christ message, because there's so much, there's a cardinal out my window. There's so much, he took off otherwise. I was going to I was thinking about turning the camera, but anyway, he's gone. 11:11 as I turn back. So, it's all like that's my biggest hang up. It's like I always feel as soon as somebody brings up something that sounds like a church motivated or sentiment of some kind of thing, I can't do it. And I've had a lot of frustrations with the point, trying to start sharing any kind of message, right? Like me navigating what the message is that I'm supposed to be sharing even. A big hang up for me all along the way has always been, this feeds into the part of why I had such a struggle with using my voice, period. You know, of course, there's the family conditioning stuff and the scapegoat stuff that like fed into it. But also the church brainwashing. So as I've been trying to, you know, navigate my YouTube journey, for example, it's been my healing process. I've talked a lot about my not so favorable responses regarding the church conditioning that I've had, and like the things that I've been learning that are in stark contrast to what the church was trying to push at me when I was growing up, right? And just like finding all these points where the church message doesn't line up with the Christ message. A big part of that was Jesus had to come out of the religion of the time. And it was not to create another fucking religion. That wasn't the point of it. So the fact that it's become this monstrosity that it has been. Now, mind you, I know there are plenty of decent Christians out there that do not fall into the, I guess like really the ones that are flat out trying to bash you over the head with the Bible and how this is an inerrant thing because they told us it is. And we don't have the sense to pay attention to the contradictions because we were taught to ignore those. Yeah. Anyway, I have much rage when it comes to seeing specific spaces, like culturally speaking, where the church is actively acting against the Christ message. And of course, you know, they're going to claim that it's aligned with the Christ message because the Bible has the words of Jesus, even though the words that they're sharing in the cases where they're like abusing people are rarely Jesus's words. There's a reason Jesus hung out with the outcasts, and basically, if you want to understand that reason, all you have to do is look at the church and how hate-filled most of the people there are. There are some that do not fit this. There are some good people in there. There absolutely are. I've met many of them, but I'm also very aware that there's a larger number that are doing these things, that are essentially abusing people and hiding behind the Jesus name just because they've been brainwashed into thinking that that's what they're supposed to be doing. I've lived that. I was brainwashed that way for a while too, right? So there's like the anger that I have toward the religion comes from being able to see the fact that it's actively being used to abuse people, right? Like the extensive history that the church has with basically keeping people, essentially with protecting abusers and at very least emotionally and psychologically abusing the abused and not helping to fix the problem anywhere because they're denying there's a problem because, you know, some fucking pastor or whatever was caught with some like, what did I do? See, this is why I get like, I have issues with like even trying to communicate the messages, like trying to speak to specifics. That's not what I'm here to do. It's not. My own lived experiences and seeing those who are actively harmed by these things that are in place, or listening to like pastors say like stupid shit like the Berecker that I follow on Instagram now, he had this thing that he posted where a pastor was talking about, you know, seeing people's social media posts and they should be ashamed of themselves and like all these things about how they should consider, if they can't show their pastor their pictures or whatever, then they shouldn't be posting them on their social media. But it's like that whole idea is like in and of itself that we need the pastor to stand in between us receiving any kind of direction from the divine. I mean, that's exactly what allows the toxic systems, that's what allows abusers to continue abusing people, basically. Anyway, one of the difficulties that I've had in trying to navigate what it is I'm supposed to be talking about on here is because I know there's so much of it that goes back to church, and church pisses me off to no end. Specifically, religion pisses me off to no end, right? So knowing, hey, that's kind of cute. Oh, there's a little blue jay taking a bath in the waterfall. Anyway, I don't remember what I was saying. Okay. because I know so much of it is wrapped up with this anger toward religion, period, and feeling like it's a literal step backwards anytime somebody's trying to, nudge me in the right direction or whatever. It's like, like the fury. Because it's a literal step backwards. I was trying to sort some of this out a while back, and then I came across Monty Mader's page and loved it. And then because of her, I came across the Berecker and also J Brick's art. I will tag them in the description, or give their information in the description there, because I'm not real smart on this technology thing. There's I'm limited on what I can do with it. But I started having these types of messages come up in front of me, and what I realized was I don't need to address the stuff that they're addressing, because that's why they are there addressing it. Right? So the point of existence is we take what resonates from the messages we come up with along the way. If something resonates, then there's a reason, right? So something in that is for you, right? Okay, while I'm thinking about this, I thought it was kind of funny today. I put this shirt on, and it didn't burn witches, they burned women. And I was over at the cemetery. I walked my dogs before I went over and walked my brother's dogs today. When we got back in the car, and they were done getting their drinks, water and everything, for some reason I felt the need to go on Instagram before I pulled out of the cemetery. And when I did, I came across this page, another page that I started following recently, Pissed Magistus. And he was talking about basically how, sexuality, especially women's sexuality, has been demonized, right? And, of course, the church would have you believe that it's this big awful thing. And then he's talking about how if sex makes women dirty, then what does that say for men, right? But one of the things he talked about somebody, another creator, and I came across her message not that long ago as well. I did not follow her yet, and then I lost the thing. But what she was talking about was how, okay, historically, women have not been allowed to buy property, right? And we don't have to look very far to find difficulties with, even bank accounts. Sorry, my brother sent me a message. Women weren't supposed to be able to have their own bank account without a husband to help, right? Or to co-sign, right? And all these different things along the way that have been set up specifically to keep women from being able to have things. And because this is an important point. Because this is also another thing I've been hearing a lot of with, the alpha male claiming types who want to blame women for why they can't find women. Those of us who have been jaded enough by life that we are not willing to revert back to old ways of being just to have a man in our lives. How because there are enough women now choosing that they would be better off alone than with the shitty selection there are, not all of them by any means, but by and large, the ones that are actively seeking are looking for the ones that are, can essentially be ruled over, right? And okay, let's go back to my little experience on the dating app a few years ago where I came across the profile of the guy who said, if you have or ever have had green hair, do not even bother talking to me. I'm looking for somebody I can take to church. Like, my immediate reaction was just, oh, it's the green that's a problem, is it? And like, not completely every time, but pretty regularly every time since then, I have tried to include green somewhere in my hair, and that's kind of as a reminder to myself of douchey dudes like that. Because I remember seeing that and, having this big reaction and then thinking, anybody worth my time isn't going to care what color my hair is. He's just not. Whatever the fullness of the expression that is me is, that's what he will be drawn to, right? So not trying to make me shrink myself to be acceptable for him to take to church. So yet again, we come back to that church. Yes. Or, the toxic marriage situation that I had where, I had a job in mental health before I married my ex. And I had a retirement fund that he had no part of, right? And it was just me and my job. The company and I were paying into my retirement. And then, when we were looking at moving to Alabama for his job, we decided to take some money out of my retirement to help us with the move. Now, the dude that the entire time we were together claimed I only married him for his money. Basically, okay, first off, in order to take the money out of the retirement fund after I was married, I basically had to have his permission. Even though he had absolutely nothing to do with it, the only thing that had changed was I had taken on his name and, acknowledged that I was married. So then to do anything with it, I needed him to sign as well to give permission for me to take this money out, right? Even though it ended up being specifically to help us with the move, which also, the asshole who wants to say that I was only ever after him for his money, he also let me max out a couple of student loans to help get his truck in good condition. Like, it didn't have an AC, and that was the biggest thing that had to be fixed before we moved to Alabama, because I was not about to drive a truck around in Alabama without a working air conditioner. And so that was one of the things, right? But there were a bunch of other little things, and I'm wanting to say it was like somewhere around $4,000 anyway that I had from my student loans toward getting his truck fixed. The truck that he got to keep. The student loans that I still am getting, having interest accrue on, right? So I got the freaking thing the other day, my seminary stuff. Of course, I had to take out loans and everything for that. It was like, I think $88,000 in student loans for my time in seminary. And $16,000 in interest since then. It's like, the fuck? But I was after his money. So basically, I willingly went along with fucking myself over because that was the system that I was in, right? I was raised in the system where, the husbands are supposed to give a shit about, their wives. And then I ended up married to one that did not give a shit and was literally just trying to suck the life out of me and get whatever he could from my money, right? So my retirement was gone, right? So, and I had to have his permission to help with that move. And then he didn't help me at all when I was trying to find a job and needed to make a car payment, right? So my car ends up getting repoed, right? So there again, he was all about claiming that he just couldn't afford it, with his $26 an hour or whatever it was at that point. He just absolutely could not help me in any way on that stupid car. And so my car got repoed. And I've talked about that on here a few times too, so I'm not going to revisit all those details. But when I left, when I left him that last time, he had 3 vehicles. Now, of course, the car didn't work because the transmission was dead. And he had gotten an SUV because where I wanted, when we did our taxes that year, it was the last time we filed taxes together, I wanted to use that money to fix the car we already had. He wanted to use that money as a down payment on a new car and take on a like $550 a month car payment. It's like, yeah, but I'm the one that was like this big, awful, I was only after his money, right? But like this whole system literally set me up to try to fail, or like to be able to allow myself to fail in all these ways. Because patriarchy is toxic. And that's just all there is to it. Because the patriarchal systems are so set on sucking the life out of everybody else to feed back into the patriarchy only. Okay. I'm going to revisit my notes from yesterday, so let me go grab them. Hold on. Okay. So I'm kind of redoodling it because I have other doodles on the original doodle now. Okay, so toxic patriarchy type things. And it goes right in with the family stuff that I've talked about a million times on here because my family has been very much a part of that toxic patriarchal system. And talked about how everybody was basically feeding into my grandpa's illusion. He wanted the illusion of the big happy family. So my family all bought into contributing to his illusion and making it seem like it was a big happy family, even though it very much was not. Yeah. So because I was the one that saw through that and that realized it was not a happy family, and just because they were claiming to fit this idea on the outside, like when you really paid attention to what was going on the inside, it was anything but. It was just like a toxic system, right? So my grandfather was, basically it was all about keeping his illusion alive. So my grandmother was the first one that bought into his bullshit on that, entered the agreement to keep the illusion alive, right? So anyway, let's have my foot and see if I can do this without losing everything. Okay, so my little doodle here comes from the idea, I don't remember where I heard it, but somewhere along the line, I heard somebody talking about, we'll come back to me first, about how, when, obviously it's not going to be these names at the start point, but for me looking back, my grandmother, when she was pregnant with my mother and, getting ready to give birth, right? At that point, I heard somewhere that girls are born with all the eggs they will ever have in their lifetime, right? So, if you're born with all the eggs you're going to have in your lifetime, then that means when grandma is pregnant with mom, then the granddaughter there's 3 generations right there that are all connected. So that's where part of this idea comes from. So there's that. Okay, so this is that concept. So here's my grandma, my mom, and me. And then, okay, so this one will represent my grandpa. And of course, he enters the agreement with my grandmother. And because she is, I've I call her the first line of complacency, but this that's kind of irrelevant at the moment. Okay, so she and my grandpa get married and enter into this energetic agreement. Because of her decision, he is given access to the life force energy of both my mother and me, right? And my mom had 2 sisters, so with the same principle on that, he's also got access to my aunts and their daughters' energy. Now, of course, this is not to rule out the sons aspect. They're still very much, when my mom was born and had all the eggs she was going to have, which would, even those that would eventually become me and my brother, right? So my grandfather had access to my brother's life force as well. So that's kind of the idea here. And yeah. Anyway, so just because of this agreement he entered into with my grandmother, excuse my mess over there, I haven't cleaned in a while. I kind of stopped. It came to an abrupt ending on the packing because I've been dog sitting and it's just a hot mess. Anyway, so then when, my dad comes around to enter into agreement with my mother, because of their agreement, he also gets access to the to the egg that becomes eventually me, right? So through nothing I've done in this scenario, just my grandmother entered an agreement with my grandfather and my father entering agreement with my mother, that's given the 2 of them access to my energy as well, right? So never mind when, when I become an adult and have my own life and already have these existing connections. But then, I feel like I might have explained this better yesterday. Okay, so there's lots of ways that, we establish cords with other people. And for the sake of this little storytelling time, for my decisions, we're just going to choose to bring into the equation the encounters that actually involved, sex. Yeah. So there's the second boyfriend that I had, because did not have it with the first one, the bad decision that I made with the one night stand, which was a whole hot mess in and of itself, and then the toxic ex. So this is just, these are the connections from somebody else's decision. These are toxic bad decisions I made, right? So, but that still gave somebody access to my life force energy. Now, the big thing on here is, like, I've talked about energetic cords a lot, and that's basically what this is supposed to represent. Probably not communicating that all the way through, because that's how my brain works, and I'm still, like, this whole journey for the YouTube thing has been a matter of purging out the old useless information that I just was carrying around as dense weight that I needed to heal from. the healing process, which is unpacking that and setting it down so I can make other connections. And then this, which I'm still working on the pieces. So, just for this scenario, it's just, okay, I think I talked about yesterday's video even, the dream that I had, I think it was like 2020, 2021-ish. I really want to say 2020, but I'm not going to fully commit to that because of other things that I've been working out. Okay. So in 2020, we're going to go to like some crazy stuff for a while because I always do that. So in 2020, I'm made aware of there's this band that I really love that is coming to Cincinnati, and I'm not in Cincinnati. I'm in Indianapolis. Well, I'm not actually in Indianapolis, but that's closer to where I'm at. But they weren't going to be coming to Indy that time around, but they were going to be in Cincy, and it was like, well, I would go to Cincinnati for a concert, especially for that one because I loved them so much. And then, the day I found out about the concert and heard about it on the radio, they talked about this other group that was on tour with them. So I was all kinds of interested because it's going to, I've already made the decision that I'm going to this concert and I've never heard this other group. But then, the DJ on the radio introduces them and plays one of their songs, like, badass, love it. Okay. So, 2020 for sure, I got on Instagram, and it was after I had this thought of, I didn't think I would get on any kind of social media because I had Facebook, and that seemed to be like where all my connections were already there. So what did I need any more social media for? But then I had this really strong sense that I was supposed to get on Instagram. So it's like, I don't know what the fuck this is all about, but I think it was like September 2020. I got on Instagram. It was before I left the factory job that I was working at the time. So I connected with some people that had Instagram before I left. So that's how I know that one for sure was 2020. Now, I started listening to, when I got on Instagram, it's like, well, it looks like what people do is follow other people, right? So I started following all these, particularly musicians and bands and whatnot, so I was like trying to figure this thing out. I just knew that I had a sense that I was supposed to get on this Instagram thing, so I did, and I started following all these pages, and yeah, so then, the concert was supposed to be in May 2020, but then there was a pandemic, so it got pushed to November. Well, so I was bummed, and there was, I want to say, the one band that I had just started following was on, or they did like a live stream concert, and so I was like, all right, I'll do that instead, right? Since this other thing wasn't working out and I really wanted to go to a concert or something. So that was the best I had, right? And in that time frame, I was really aware of this one dude. There were the 5 guys in the band, right? So when I was watching the live stream, it's like, there's something here for me. And I don't really know what that is, right? It was just this idea. There was something there that I was supposed to find. And so I'm just kind of like going through trying to figure this out, right? And there were a couple, sorry, I talk a lot. There were a couple people that was like, yeah, that's like really close, but not it, and then there was this other one that's like, maybe, but I wasn't entirely 100% on it right then. So it was just still this awareness of the energy, right? And what happened, and I didn't really know what was going on or what was happening at that point, if you will. I had this really strong sense beyond that, like, it just started activating the sense of not feeling safe in my own body. Right. And I did not have any idea that it was directly connected to this concert scenario thing that I'm talking about, or like these people, until much later. But I started having weird dreams, and this one guy in particularly appeared in several dreams, and other people in the band also did, but not near as much as the one. And the dream that this little scenario is taking me to is, I had this dream where, like, it starts, I'm outside and there's all these cars and we're walking. My ex wasn't even there with me at that point, but I still had the anger. But the next scene flashes to, I'm inside this building and sitting on this couch, and my ex is on one end of it, and Ziva was sitting in my lap snarling at my ex. And I was like really super angry at my ex, and I thought it had something to do with the fact that two of my dogs weren't there, but it was a dream, so yeah. But also, like, the big thing was, okay, also the building had like this orangey hue to it, right? So anyway, we're not gonna worry about that one. Anyway, so I'm aware of sitting on the couch with my ex on the other end and the dog on my lap, and I'm aware that there are four of five guys from this band on stools behind the couch. And it's like, they're not really aware of us. They're kind of, talking amongst themselves and like not even seeing us. Like, we're not even on the radar, right? But I remember seeing this one guy there, the one that was like, there's something there. And feeling, I was really confused at why they were there, and like focused on him, because it seemed like he was somewhat vaguely aware that I was there, but not able to see me or whatever. Yeah. Eventually I realized that I could go back into the stream. I've gone into it I think 4 times. And one of the times, the first, I was so distracted by the anger toward my ex that was pretty much the extent of what I picked up from it. Also, there's a communication with the other guy who could see me in another part of the building when I had to walk away from this space and where my ex was, kind of, take a breather kind of a thing. I had an encounter with that dude. Anyway, so the next time I go into the dream, I had the sense that this guy was saying, if you need my help, let me know. And I said, I feel like I have to do this on my own. I had this really strong sense that my ex was not supposed to be in this space, period. Right? So, yeah. I don't know how much of that is actually necessary for the scenario. What it really made me realize was that he wasn't supposed to be in that in that space, but because he'd had access to me, he was like a leech on my energy, which takes us back here. So here's little toxic ex. I mean, they were both toxic in their own ways, but I mean, yeah. The connection was toxic, but yeah, this one, because I married this dude, of course, that's another thing that kind of enhances that connection, because I entered into a further agreement with him, right? So, just with the actual sexual connections, even from the stand, grandpa and grandma, and then dad and mom, that automatically gave each of them access to my energy, because we're, the mother wound thing. The 3 generations were connected there. So because my grandfather had access to my grandmother, he was automatically given access to my mom and myself, right? And also my aunts and their daughters, right? And sons for that matter, but just the sons don't pass it on like the daughters do, right? So, right. So these are just like ways that the basically the patriarchal structure wants to. Okay, it's the reason it's so important for the patriarchy to keep everybody else diminished, because my grandfather and all his toxicity, he had access to, to us, but also, yeah, well, shit, let's just doodle. We'll doodle my aunts in here too, right? And their kids, right? So, because of this connection, he has all these established access points. Again, this is just representing the daughters on this one. But he has all of these ways of sucking life force energy from the daughters in the lines, right? So that's why it's so important for the system that currently exists to keep women from having any sort of reproductive rights, primarily, but any rights beyond that also, because they get access to all the life force energy that is in all of us just because they entered into this agreement with one person, right? So the more generations of this toxicity that there are, because of course, my grandfather, well, I'm going to complicate it if I go backwards. Yeah. Yeah, because this is just like 3 generations that I'm looking at right here, right? But every, that's why like the mother wound is such a big one to heal. And that goes to all of us have to heal the aspects within ourselves. And the work we do on ourselves automatically affects the collective, right? And it's because of these cords, right? So the patriarchy wants to rule over everybody, right? So so my grandfather had access to my grandmother because she was the original source of energetic agreement, but then she had my mom and her sisters, and of course her sisters also had daughters, so it's basically through layers of okay, I talk about the sacred womb space a lot because that's the source of creation kind of a thing, and because he had access to my grandmother's womb, it automatically gave him access to the life force energy that would come through those that also came from that space, right? That makes sense. Now, I've talked about there are lots of other ways that these kind of connections can be established, but this specific example is a prime example, I think, for why it's been so important for the patriarchal religions to marry girls young, before they have any kind of they don't have the education, and they don't have any kind of awareness of sexuality. They're just taught that sex is bad for girls especially, right? But guys are somehow heroes for having as many as possible. Yeah. and I'll go back to my basic training thing where, okay, like the the story I go back to the most with basic training was going into the military. Part of the military entrance processing was they have to determine that you are what was on your birth certificate, right? That your inside parts and your outside parts match what is on your birth certificate. So there's, like I've talked about how there's the thing, you go into this room with the other claiming to be females, I guess, to, people that are enlisting as female. And you have to be in there in the space with all these other girls in your bras and your panties and the socks to keep your dignity or to give you some semblance of dignity. And, like the first part of it is just like all this like testing and making sure that, your spine works properly and you can squat and do these things that are going to be required because of your military experience or whatever. And then the next part is there you go into this other room, more private, with a military proven to be female doctor and her assistant, basically for the purpose of having a third party there to make sure that nothing inappropriate happens, right? So in this space, they go in, they make sure the inside parts are what's supposed to be there, and they make sure the outside parts are what's supposed to be there, right? Military proven to be female because it's so important. But all it does is lock people into this idea of this or that, right? So, with the idea that men are the ones that are supposed to be in the military and the women are not, right? So the people that have that idea, which are frequently from this patriarchal structure, they also, it becomes this thing that, basically locks it into where bullying is okay, right? So the supposed to be here, the men that are supposed to be in the military, versus the not supposed to be here, but wanted the equality. So chose that they wanted to be here, and, fought for it or whatever. But we don't believe that they're actually supposed to be here. So what it does is basically make it okay for those that are supposed to be here to assault the ones who are not supposed to be there, right? It just sets up a system where it's completely okay to abuse people, which is why, rape and sexual assault are so huge in the military, because this or that. But, okay. I will say it again. We all have both the masculine and feminine within us, right? So the biggest part of my journey that I'm realizing, it's like I've always over-identified with the feminine aspect of myself because I was trying to fit the church mold, damn it. So when, it's talking about, wives are supposed to be submissive to the husbands, and, children are supposed to listen to the parents or whatever. And there's the idea of being seen and not heard, which I don't know that that's actually shit in the Bible versus manipulated stuff from people just trying to take it and use it for their own purposes. Either way, I've talked a lot about how this whole, my biggest struggle in my life has been the trying to be confident in using my voice, right? Because I have never been allowed or encouraged to speak up and be heard. My grandfather was very much afraid that I was going to ruin his perfect illusion of his illusion of his perfect little family. And everybody is so happy because I wasn't happy and I wasn't afraid to admit to it. But the means of coercing me into falling in line was to make me the scapegoat, and thus I'm the problem and nobody should listen to me, right? Basically that whole idea. I think the chords, like this chord aspect, right? Okay, so my mom has 2 sisters, but my mom is 5 years older than her sisters, and I've talked a lot about my cousins. The next one closest to my age is 12 years younger, and then the other daughter is 13 years younger. So the 5 years that my mother had just with my grandparents, that she got a lot of time where that connection, where he was sucking the life out of her, was enhanced by, because they had all this time without the other daughters, right? And because there was so much more, because I'm 12 and 13 years older than, the next 2 girl cousins, that cord was even strengthened all that time by the fact that I had all these interactions with him for like all those years before they were even born, right? So it's like those are things that reinforce the cords, and of course these are karmic, icky, toxic on this situation. You talked about the silver cords being the ones that suck the life out of you, and the red ones that, tie you to like your soul family, the ones that, the life-giving connections, right? Okay. Oh, the leech thing. I'm getting a little bit better about narrowing my thoughts down, but it's still, there's still a lot of them. I'm still, I've talked about the biggest thing that I've noticed is I've been collecting data my entire life. So now it's trying to make sense of the data and figure out what goes where, right? And I mean, I feel like I might as well just like, all right, let's go back to my wall, my chaos wall. Yeah. Okay. So my crazy paint job here. Okay, so the deal with the wall. When I was painting my room, I started with, this, my tree, right? Because I knew I didn't have any of the paint that was originally on the walls, but I had enough of these other colors that I could figure out a way to cover up the fact that I had these big massive holes from moving the DVD cabinet, right? So what I did was I made the tree. Not the one that's in the picture, but the one that's like, yeah, that one. Even though, there's a bunch of shit on the wall now. Yeah. So put the tree there, and this all happened after I was skating. So what I noticed was it's way less chaotic from, that other part, right? I mean, except for the fact that there's a bunch of shit on the wall, because that's how I am. Okay, so when I didn't skate before I painted, it ended up more chaotic, right? And that was the biggest thing that I noticed. And when I get less stuff on the walls, I'll probably share that too. But again, I've shared that plenty of times. But the big thing was when I didn't skate and get some of that energy, burn that out of my system, it just ended up in this chaotic mess on the wall, right? So what I realized was it's like, that's like basically how these cords work. Like if you don't have boundaries to block some of the bullshit, which I didn't know was a thing that was even possible to do for a long time, you end up with everybody else's chaos in your system because of these energetic cords, right? And so the ones that I have showed here are just family connections and just daughter connections mainly. Right? But So my grandfather has access to, or had access before he died, he had access to all these other people just because we were in his family line, right? So that's what the patriarchy wants, is to, okay, going back to that point on, if they, basically, hijack girls' entire lives because they forced them to marry early. My mom was 19 when she got married. Just go at that point. And I thought I was a problem because I was 29 before I got married. And I jumped into a situation because I felt like I was getting ready to be I felt like I was a burden for my family, right? That's because that's the idea, right? The idea of being a spinster, and that you're somebody else's property, and all that bullshit, which is continuously reaffirmed along the way. Because, like I've talked about how I needed either my dad or my brother to tell me not to marry my ex. Because for some reason, because of the system, this patriarchal system, where I needed the man to tell me that that wasn't a good choice for me, and they didn't, right? So then I ended up marrying the bad choice, which gave him direct access to my life force energy, right? And then he becomes a toxic leech and is continuing to siphon the energy from me, even after we got divorced and everything, because I didn't know I could clear that connection. I have since figured that out. It's like you can break the karmic connections, and anything that's not meant to be with you and to go with you, you can cut those cords. That's entirely possible. I watched there's a mystical connections thing that Hay House did, and Radley Valentine was talking about calling back to yourself all the pieces that have gone away. And he talked about how, like, from the solar plexus, which is the third chakra, we basically send out feelers to the environment around us, as a means of trying to help, right? Trying to heal what isn't working in the world around us, right? So going with that energetic cord thing, he talked about how every now and then you just need to remember to call back all the pieces of yourself that you've lost along the way or have given away along the way. Call back all the stuff that's yours. So when I was like, it's that easy? It's like, just that intuitive voice was like, yeah. It's like, oh, cool, let's do that. So yeah. And I talked about the one guy in the dream that, like, I was the one that said if I needed his help, let him know, right? So twin flame, talked about that many, many times. And that's why that is the strongest connection, honestly. And thus why he was saying, if you need my help, let me know. Right? So then what I realized was that carried over into, like, the waking life. So, like, this was a dream space. But then when I was at the family, it was a celebration of life for a family friend that died last year in March. Right? And the thing was in June. And this was after the dream where the twin flame says, if you need my help, let me know. And it's really hot that day. And my mom and my mom, my dad and I are out in the backyard of this place. And a couple that my mom and dad had been good friends with. It was a girl another lady that my mom had gone to school with. Like, it was her and her husband. And then the lady that my mom or was my mom's friend. You know, her husband was the one that died. And I've talked about her on here several times too. She's the one that was trying to tell me that grandmas can do whatever they want because they're grandmas. Yeah. That one. Anyway, while we were at the celebration of life. Okay, so it's my parents and me. I'm sitting at the end, and then across the table, this lady and her husband. And it's hot, and the sun's beating down, and we were more under the canopy than the other couple was. So at one point, the husband comes around, and he's standing kind of like between me and my mom, but behind us. So he wasn't right immediately hovering, but there was just this span of time where I just sitting there, I started to get really uncomfortable, right? And I didn't know what exactly was going on with that. I just knew he was making me uncomfortable, and it wasn't anything he was doing or saying. It was just his presence, right? And thinking back to the dream where he said, if you need my help, let me know. I took that live action and was kind of thinking to myself, in this lived out scenario space, I was like, hey, he's making me uncomfortable. How can I make him go away or whatever? And it was like, within 30 seconds, this guy goes and sits down on the other side of the table again. Within 2 minutes, he was looking kind of anxious and looked at his wife and said, we need to leave. I was like, oh, it's that easy? 1-11-11. So it was just this thing that, the twin flame, right? This connection that's always lurking around energetically, and appearing in my dreams. And yeah, visions and things. It's I can actually connect with this person, this energy, and have actual lived out side effects of that. That's kind of cool, actually. Yeah, maybe I need to work on some clarity of thought and getting to the point quicker and all that stuff. Yeah, work in progress. But that makes me think of this other thing that I've noticed today, right? Okay, so my rings. This, my little Larimar pinky ring, I usually wear on this side, which I now have the onyx on, right? And the connection that I made today, I changed it last week because this the ring wouldn't go over my knuckle on the other side. I mean, this one obviously does. But because this one was getting stuck, I was like, all right, well, I'll switch it, right? I decided to switch it, and it worked. So now I have the Larimar on the left hand and the onyx on the right. What I was realizing today was this is another one of those scenarios where it's life is teaching me, right? It's that's if you're open to learning, God will use anything to teach you, right? So there are these lessons and things that you want to make connections on. Be open to whatever means the lesson comes from, and just look for the lesson in it. What I noticed today. Okay. So I've talked a lot about how, my struggle to use my voice has been one of my biggest battles in my life, right? And I've talked about on the twin flame connection side of things. Okay. I watched a video at one point where it's talking about there are often marks of some sort that will connect with the twin flame connection, that connect in some way to what the bigger purpose is, right? So I've talked about this a lot on here too, but not today. So obviously I'll just give it to you today. So you don't have to go looking. Okay. So my phone's at 15%. Okay. Anyway, with the idea of the markings, right? And of course, I picked this up when after I committed my love and career lives to the universe to lead, and was pointed in his direction, and it was, I had that voice that chimed in saying, "That's him. That's the one you've been looking for." And my immediate response was, "Yeah, right. He's out of my league." Right. But I got really into one of his songs that, I wasn't sure if it had come out recently. He had reposted something on Instagram that was just like a clip of him singing the song. And I was like, what is that song? I don't remember this song. Right. But then I looked it up, and it had, I had it on like some of my other playlists. I just hadn't listened to it for whatever reason. It wasn't one of my go-tos until after he posts it. And then I look for it. And then like I just got like completely consumed with the song. Right. And it's like I was just listening to it over and over and over again. It's like, I feel this all the way through, right? Like all the way through all of me. It's like I just feel the weight of this song in my system. And it was one of those things where it was like, it felt comforting, like there was somebody else that got the pain that I was carrying, right? So the song was kind of heavy. Made me, like I was just so focused on the heavy aspect of it. And I was like I remember seeing some of his pictures and was like, but he looks so sad, right? And then like in response to this, he posts a picture on Instagram and it looks immensely lighter. It's like it was literally in response to me having posed this thought, and then he posts something where he looks a little happier. So I took a screenshot of the picture, and this is when I started noticing 37s following me, which I've talked about in here a lot. That ended up being my great grandfather's birthday, March 7th. And like the picture that I took a screenshot of was one of the first places that it started being a noticeable thing that was following me, right? So I started seeing it everywhere after that point, but it started with that point. So anyway, I would look at this picture and just kind of disappear. And, that was what took me into realizing I could go back into the dream and all this stuff. Okay. So the marks, right? I noticed we match because I have two here, except for I think his are on the right side. Mine are on the left. Right. So, I don't think they're exactly like. The weird thing is, this one I've always had. This one I have no idea when it got there. It's been there for at least a decade. I can tell you that much. I just remember looking one day and it's like, where the hell did that come from? Okay, whatever. Anyway, back to the marks. So, mine's on the left side. So, left side is the feminine side, which is the more passive or, receptive, but not action-oriented side. So since he has the markings on the right side, that means that, he was set up to take more action earlier on. But then we also have, where's it at? It's there, I promise. Okay, right there. He's got a scar that goes the other way. Not in the exact same spot, but still got one. And mine starts left and goes right, which means I had to learn to start using my voice. And his, he's got the freckles on the right side, and his scar goes right to left. So where I have to learn to use my voice in this existence, he has to learn to tone his down some, right? Not that he's not using it. He's in music, so of course he's using his voice a lot. But, he started out in the lead role and being, having more, taking more action with using voice and all that fun stuff. And mine started completely passive, and I've had to learn to use it, right? So as I came into this connection, or was made aware of the connection rather, because it's always been there, I just wasn't aware of it previously, which again is exactly why the patriarchal systems want the thing, want to have control of like the, women's reproductive systems and all this stuff. They want to suck the life out of us before we even have the ability to know that there's something more that we are meant for, right? So like this connection that has always been there. And I've talked about all the ways his name's been dancing around me my entire life, and his birthday, right? And even his initials, right? So I've done lots of videos where I've talked about all of those things. So yeah. What I realized when I was skating one day, because that's one of my big ways to clear some of the density from my system, is that at a time I wasn't able to use my voice. It's like he was, getting more confident in using his and like singing and screaming and, creating his sound or whatever, but he was releasing for both of us. Right. So something like I always had this very strong sense that I was just supposed to choke on and I wasn't ever supposed to speak. I was supposed to choke on whatever I might have to offer to anybody and just nope. I wasn't supposed to talk about it. Right. And these karmic cords are the very thing that keep us bound to those types of beliefs too. Right. So my grandfather wanting to keep his illusion alive. I mean, the only way for him to keep his illusion alive was to squash me as much as possible. So I knew that I never felt like I was part of his family, right? It's like he was always looking at the thing that was different about me or the thing that stood out, go back to the conversation from 2010 when we were on his back porch. It was him, me, my mom, and I think my aunt had just gotten over there. And he says, or my mom tells him that I was signed up for a motorcycle class because the ex that is on the paper, that's not the one that I married. He got a motorcycle and we were going out on his bike all the time for a while. And I got to a point where it's like, if we're going to do this all the time, I would like my own, right? I would like to know how to do this on my own so we can just do it together, right? Rather than only riding on the back of his every single time, right? So it's like, if we're doing this together, I feel like I should also know how to do this, right? And so I signed up for a motorcycle class, which led to the conversation over on my grandfather's back porch where he got pissed because he found out I was going to do I was signed up for a motorcycle class. He says, why you always got to do everything different? You got two of the ugliest cats in the world, got damn geckos, tattoos, and now you're doing this motorcycle class, right? And I was so proud of myself. I just turned around and looked at him. I said, my sole purpose in life is to piss you off. I wish I would have really held on and understood to the full capacity of which that was a truth, right? That was one of my very deepest truths was that I was very much here to piss him off because I can't just go along to the bullshit illusion when it's not real, right? It's like everybody else is okay with buying into his illusion and making it look like everybody's happy, but if I'm not happy, I can't say that I'm happy, So, yeah. Anyway, I talk a lot. And going back to, the marks thing, right? So, so I started with not having a lead speaking kind of thing, but then I've had to, my scar here, it's like I'm having to learn that. So as I was made aware of this twin flame connection, I've talked about one of the first things that was brought to my attention was he had to be in a spotlight for me to find him, but how is he ever going to find me if I didn't start doing more than I'd ever done? And I was terrified to start doing the thing before I started to do the thing, right? So I started in November 11th, 2023, and the only reason I did it was because of that thought. How was he ever going to find me? So it's like, all right. So I started doing it, and I didn't even know what I was doing until I realized that, what became of it was exactly what I was supposed to do and it was, a means of telling my story and, unpacking the toxic beliefs that I've carried my entire life and being able to set them down so I can get more useful information and, make sense of it with that. Right? So yeah, anyway, back to the rings. So the blue is now on the left hand, right? Larimar. So, and this is one of those throat chakra stones. So, of course, going back to, it was like a strengthening my feminine side with the stone for the throat chakra, which actually makes sense because, even as I'm looking now, like the bracelets I have over here, okay, I got sodalite, labradorite, blue kyanite, that's angelite, more blue kyanite. Then the other side, there's just one, which is amazonite. But yeah, it's like, since I put it on this side, it's like it's a kind of a support on strengthening my ability to use my voice and the protective side, right? So like as I'm making space for what I have to share to be shared, it's like this is like on the masculine side, right? So as a protective stone, right? So yeah. Anyway, that was just like a random thought I had today that kind of made me laugh. So, what else did I not, or did I start and not finish? This little thing is ready for me to do the thing. I wasn't ready to do the thing yet. Right, so the chords. Yeah, like, I don't know. Okay, that thought was just going back to the, that, okay, yeah, religious aspect, right? So everything I loathe about religion is because it's like trying to diminish the feminine as much as possible. I've talked about different ways that pans out. Demonizing emotions in boys, right? So, no, not right now. Take a break. So the idea that, like, I remember growing up and hearing a lot about how, boys aren't supposed to cry and all this stuff. And now there's a whole fucking movement in the Christian fundamentalist brainwashing about how empathy is a bad thing. It's like, no, see, that's just another thing where they're trying to demonize the feminine because, that's emotional aspect. Because it's another way to, okay, so I've talked about how my entire life I felt very overly connected to the feminine aspect of myself, right? And the twin flame connection was what basically forced me to start using my voice. And what I've been thinking about a lot here lately, it's like, okay, so for this twin flame connection, it's like I've had to step up and start taking action on using my voice because that was something that was squashed so completely previously, right? And, all the ways that the world has tried to keep boys and men from their hearts, right? So guys have been encouraged to have as many sexual partners as possible, right? Because these chords, right? So you get the original agreement, but then you also get access to these other levels just from the womb space. So the more sexual partners toxic types have, the more they are able to suck the life out of, generations, right? Which is exactly why the patriarchal structures have been able to be as horribly in charge as they have been. And, they're like, I've talked about many times, this whole idea of like, okay, religion is like the reason, like particularly Christianity, because it's not about the Christ message at all. It's very much contrary to the Christ message, right? So religion is the very antichrist they want everybody afraid of. And they want you afraid of it because then they can control you. And then they have access to like all these, if you're too afraid to, start exploring what you can do to disconnect these damn energetic cords, then, people that shouldn't ever have had access end up with access, right? So the toxic types like my grandfather, who ended up with, he had 3 daughters. Lucky for him, he had 3 daughters. And then, 3 granddaughters. Of course, again, he had access to the son's energy as well, the grandsons, but they don't have the womb. So it's not as extensive, and they're not drawing as much from future generations, right? So which is why the religious types especially have pushed to marry girls very young, and how we're taught that you have to marry young or you're not desirable, right? Or you're a spinster, right? All the things that are wrong with you if you don't enter into these agreements early on. But they don't want us to be able to have the education and know that that's happening, and that is the exact thing that's giving life to the toxicity that shouldn't be there, and let's think another thing religion did. Let's go to the musician aspect, because I'm kind of partial to that one here lately. The movie Footloose, right? So nobody's supposed to be dancing, right? Nobody's supposed to be listening to the music and like all these things. It's the devil's stuff, right? So what's the point of that idea there? Because that's very much... I talked about in yesterday's video, I think, the how when I was looking at going to seminary when I was in undergrad, I started with Indiana Wesleyan. And for some reason, I was reading, every now and then I just like get really overly, focused on something, and I start, like in this case, reading the whole handbook and coming across the section where it talks about how, you can basically be kicked out of school for any kind of dancing that's not like a group dance at a wedding. It's like, so you're telling me that I am responsible enough to make the decision to go on for further education, but I'm not smart enough to make a decision on whether I can dance with somebody or not. Okay. But anyway, back to the music thing. So I've heard from people, how many people have been made to feel like creative endeavors were not good enough? Okay, you want to be a musician? Get a real job. That kind of stuff, right? But then too, going back to the sacral chakra, and that's right there with the womb as well. Creativity, right? So they want to squash creativity because for those in the masculine packaging, 3333, as I'm talking about this, for those in the masculine packaging, it's about the heart connection, right? So physically, they have the parts that are supposed to make them superior, right? According to the religious bullshit that's being fed to us, or rather forced down our throats. So if we kill off creativity, then that disconnects the masculine from the heart. Now, another thing that I'm realizing with this twin flame connection. Okay, so It has been very important for me to connect with my body and to find what I like anyway, right? And part of that is because we are directly connected energetically. Sacred womb space, right? It's a means of waking up the energetic connection that's always been there. But, it's the red thread, right? So the life-giving, I've talked about, I had that one vision a couple weeks ago where it's like we were it's like we merged with and within this red thread, and it was like this big life-giving thing, and it was like the more we connected, the more it was strengthened, right? So even though we have not physically met, right, we've met, I've talked about the live stream that I happened into, that I said something and he responded and it was like I'd been seen. And then I did a meet and greet thing that I went ahead and, I'm at 5%. My phone dimmed, damn it. No. Okay, before we lose it. Maybe. There we go. Okay. Hey, you need to move over. Mama needs to sit here. We're not done yet. We're not done yet. Here, take that. Yeah, but so that connection is the life-giving one, right? So the things I'm learning, which includes getting to know myself and what I like and what I enjoy, also goes back to that yin yang thing, right? So I've talked about how, we carry each other with us, right? So even though we're not together physically, there's the little bit of the black and the white and a little bit of the white and black, right? So the big thing that I've connected it to is the, he's who he is, the as above to my so below, right? And for his heart space, the as within to my so without. So all, like, as we are connected, anything one of us does directly affects the other. So why he was able to, through his use of his voice and all of that, was able to help clear some of the density from what I was just taking on and feeling like I was just supposed to choke on my entire life, right? He was actually clearing some of that out for both of us. So, right. So, as I get to know more about physically what I do like, it awakens the connection as well, right? And it's like awakening him from within. So, now as far as where it starts or any of that, it's a back and forth that's always been there. And I feel like it's constantly been, we've been figuring this out together. Even though we're not physically together, energetically, we are doing the work that we have to do to line up with the path that brings us together. Right. So, as going back to the sacred womb space, as I am connecting with me, it awakens the me within him, right? So the heart. So, so it goes back to that, the idea that, okay, I know we've all heard it, the idea that women give sex to get love, men give love to get sex. It's like, same idea, but this is the better version of it. It's like, that's the demonized version that locks us all into the distortion. And, we look at the parts where we're not whole, but like the connection that we have here, it's like we find the wholeness within. And basically, as we heal our own whatever we have to heal. So clearing the density, unpacking all the stuff that, all the bad beliefs that got me here, and setting them aside to make space for the connection that I've always wanted. Yeah. But it's like a together process. So I've heard that there's been a lot of growth on his end, and I would believe it from what I've seen of like the music and all that good stuff. But at the same time, I have no direct connection to support that. So this is part of the reason why it's been so important for me to trust my instinct, my intuition, and roll with it. So I knew I had to start the YouTube thing because he had to be in a spotlight for me to find him, but then how would he ever find me? So I started it. And then it's been a whole series of unpacking things that I picked up along the way that, honestly, a lot of it's pretty useless once you realize what the true basis of it is. But still, you have to go through it to be able to understand it, which is exactly, I remember, that's always been the thing I've known. I wanted to understand what makes people feel, get into marriages like those in my family, where they feel stuck and like they're meant to be miserable forever. And it's I don't want that. I want, I want my best friend, right? That's what I'm interested in. Somebody I actually want to enjoy time with and spend as much time with as possible. Now, I can tell you very much, when I went into the connection with my ex, that, the one that I married, that I'm sure is still telling people I was only ever after his money, even though his truck repairs are costing a whole lot of interest on my student loan, and that damn retirement thing that I can't get back that I needed his permission on. Yeah, fuck this whole system. But even those two are necessary for this journey to really help me understand, right? So this is what I'm here to do. But going back to that, the people that are more closely, they're more specifically focused on tearing apart the fundamentalist viewpoint, the Christian nationalist thing, those that are teaching about the actual Christ message, contrary to all the bullshit that people are getting beat over the head with, in order to manipulate them to, look, I've talked a lot on here about the narcissism thing. It's religion is just another narcissist, man. So, it's got this this toxicity about it, and it keeps people locked into fear so it can abuse them. And so it can, the thing with narcissists, right? It's 1 minute they're the victim, the next minute they're the terrorist, right? And it's more often they're aligned with the terrorist side, but they claim the victim side more. And as long as they're getting attention one way or another, they don't give a shit, right? So that, it's I think Richard Grandin's the one that talks about the split, right? So that you've seen them as the victim, you've seen them as the terrorist. They're not split. That's two different aspects, two different masks. So if they try on the victim mask and you don't buy it, then they go to the other mask, right? And then they become the terrorist. And then you're split because you've seen them on both sides, so you don't know, you can't really figure out which one they're falling under, right? So that's a big part of why that was necessary for my path as well. Because, I don't like a bully. I've said that many times. I loathe bullies. And basically, religion by and large, particularly those that want to be so set in patriarchy, they're bullies. And yeah. So, the other thing with the like the different creators that I mentioned earlier. It's like they're actually, it's like what we're doing is essentially we're all building on, we all have this awareness, right? But they're able to like go in and like cut it down using actual scriptural references and like all that. And it's like, when I got my TBI, it's like, it just like, it made it so, it's like, all the stuff that was trying to stick, that would have stuck before, wasn't able to stick anymore. It's like all the conditioning aspects of it. It's like I'd hit a brick wall and there was going no further on that. It's like, now I can see that this is bullshit. Now I'm trying to figure out why exactly this is bullshit. But that was one of those points that I've had a hard time with, like trying to figure out what I'm even supposed to be talking about, because I know there's a whole lot that's wrapped up with this this disdain and aggravation with religion specifically. But then when I found like those three especially, Monty Mater, Berecker, and J Brick's art, what it made me realize was there are other people better able to handle this level of it. That's not what I'm here to do, right? It's like I'm trying to connect with all this other information and like weave it together even further. But like the actual, like the more in depth on this specific point, like the religious aspect of it, like, yeah, no, I can't give you the scriptural stuff anymore. It was like the TBI, it's like delete the file, so I remember like all the aggravating things. It kind of made them pop more, if you will. And now it's making sense of this with these other pieces of information, weaving them together at a different level. So that's what we're here to do, right? But so this patriarchal system, where grandfather wants access to all the energies, right? So he can suck the life out of them. What we're here to do is give life. So as each of us does what we are here to do with our own healing work and finding our voices and speaking up more and more and being authentically who we are, that's giving life to the red threads, right? It's enhancing those. So while this other system still exists and there's a whole lot of people trying to beat us into submission with the idea that we're supposed to have it, I mean, the more the rest of us are doing the work, the less they're able to hold on, right? The toxic karmic connections and like the patriarchal structures that are trying to force their way and assault the rest of us just by the fact that they've brainwashed us to think something that is bullshit. But, it leaves the dickhead in the White House free to steal all our money okay. I seem to remember during his first term that it was a big deal that he wasn't making money off the presidency because he had all these other sources of income. So he was able to make himself look better because he wasn't taking that money, which in and of itself, I'm pretty sure presidents have made way too much money for the rest of us. Anyway, like if you just look at that kind of monetary breakdown, they've been fucking us for a while, right? So, yeah. And so he wanted to appear like he didn't need it, right? But then he's turning around and I seem to remember something about him selling Bibles. It's like, okay, here's an example of how you're brainwashed, because now you just want a stupid ass book with his name on it. And you're claiming, you want to claim him as like the, basically the second coming of Christ. Fuck no. He's like the actual head of the snake, if you will. So, since religion is the Antichrist, yeah, we'll just leave it at that. But yeah, as more and more of us disconnect from these toxic, life-sucking leech connections and step more into the creativity and, building, right? Creating together and, like even indirectly collaborating with people. Because like every time we share somebody else's, like what somebody else is talking about, it still helps the collective move forward. So, maybe I can't give you exact things that some of them are talking about or whatever. You've seen me here probably, if you followed me long enough. I usually end up stopping when I'm trying to say what somebody said. And it's like, no, I don't know what they said. What I felt from it and what I picked up from it is this, because it triggered something in me or inspired me in some kind of way. And that was where the useful information came from. But it was from something that I had watched from this person. So yeah, but I can't summarize anything anymore either. It's just like, I don't know. Fuck, it all runs together. So much of it. But anyway, on that note, I'm going to wrap it up and get you ready. So, come here. Can we do this? Can we say, as always, I appreciate you. Until the next time. See ya.